Point and clicks were brilliant. They were kind of I'd say the bedrock of my video game stuff, but I only really played a couple. And then probably really one up until I got my PC, which came with, I think, a big disc of all the classic LucasArts games. So your Monkey Island, your Day of the Tentacles, the Indiana Jones one, all that kind of stuff. All kind of came on like a CD. So I played through a lot of those just in time to pick up Grim Fandango when that came out. Grim Fandango being at that point the kind of ultimate realization of that LucasArts point-and-click style. Moved on from the Scum engine into its kind of own thing, this kind of 3D tank control based thing, so it kind of looked a bit more like a modern game at the time. You know, pre-rendered backgrounds, 3D characters, so Resident Evil kind of style graphics, I suppose. All kind of wrapped up in this kind of amazing style, which was kind of Day of the Dead Mexican mixed with film noir Hollywood films of the 40s. This kind of hard-boiled detective story, even though he's not a detective, of a guy being swept along by a story with a femme fatale and a bad guy, and kind of themes from Casablanca and, you know, death and mortality and all this kind of stuff.
I had no idea you had this kind of power.
And it was really good. You know, it's the typical kind of LucasArts kind of daft humor, which is really good. But mixed in with that great story. The story was brilliant. There's some great cutscenes in it. Manny Calavera is a great lead. You know, he's kind of flawed, but he's interesting, and he's funny, but he's still cool with it. So you can kind of, you know, enjoy the journey you take along with him. Puzzles are what they are for a point-and-click puzzle game. Some of them are alright. Some of them are just like, what? It doesn't get into the kind of, what's the famous one? Making a fake mustache out of cat hair from sellotape or something like that. Was that from a Broken Sword game? I know there's some kind of weird one that involves using a sellotape to get hair off the back of a cat. There's nothing like that in it. It's you know, makes sense when you're in that mind space of that world, but you know, just getting into that headspace is always the issue sometimes with these games. But anyway, the actual game itself, like I say, it's that story that kind of carried through. It's one of the strongest game stories probably still around. Visually, you know, the remaster's alright. I think there's issues with the backgrounds because they're hard to kind of get up to the right resolution compared to the models, which are more easily edited, that sort of thing. But yeah, it still stands like a high watermark point-and-click game with a great story. And I think point-and-click games always make it easier. Is it easy the right word? And because of their structure, it's very easy for a point-and-click game to tell a story because that's basically what you're doing. You're kind of playing through a story. It's not quite a visual novel. It's a puzzle book, essentially. And Grim Fandango is one of the best. And also, probably, you know, it was the kind of last big hurrah before the bottom fell out of the genre. Yeah, because it wasn't long after, I think maybe like one more after this, pure LucasArts game, and then it went away for a while until Telltale Games kind of picked up the baton with their series and their kind of style of games. So yeah, if you're going to go out on a high, this is a great one to go out on because, you know, it's a great story, a great game from a genre that, you know, should still be around more than it is.
You'll get plenty.
Obviously, being a kid in the 80s, you know, Mario was it. Mario was the one you wanted to be. But I didn't really get to play that much Mario in the kind of classic, you know, golden era of the 80s. I didn't have a NES. There wasn't any kind of arcades nearby me. I'm pretty sure my cousin had a NES. I think I played Mario Brothers on there. I think I did, or maybe played it like in the other Versus machine, like in the shop. So my kind of experience of Mario was very low. Classic Mario. Then obviously I had a Game Boy. I played Super Mario Land, the first Super Mario Land, but that isn't what you'd call like a kind of pure classic style Mario game. It's very much its own thing, with its own kind of, you know, design aesthetic and its own kind of setup and all that sort of thing. It was always felt kind of like off to one side. It didn't feel like a kind of a quote proper Mario game. And then we got Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. And then we got Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. And boy howdy was this a proper Mario game. Somehow kind of leapt from the original Game Boy game to this, is insane. The sprites are big and chunky. It's got the world map. It looks and feels like a quote proper Mario game. So this really is the first Mario game that I played on the Game Boy, and what can I say? It's brilliant. It's a Mario game. What more do you want to say? His controls are great. The carrot hat makes things a bit more fun. The level design's brilliant. The big giant mechanical Mario, the Halloween level, the space level, the whale one. Each one's got its own kind of look and its own kind of way that it plays. It's just that really well designed, really well thought through platform game that Nintendo excel at with when it comes to Mario. So yeah, as quote my first playing through my first proper Mario game, and going completing it, getting to the end, beating up beating up Wario to get all the golden coins and all that stuff, was fantastic. And as a platformer, it still holds up. Kind of going back to it, the controls are still there, the aesthetic is still there. Everything's still good, and it's a Mario game. It's probably, is it the best Mario game on the Game Boy? Probably best Mario platformer. But then there's Donkey Kong as well. No, this is the proper kind of a proper Mario game in capital letters that could very easily have been done on the SNES at the time. If this came out with full color graphics on the SNES, people would have eaten it up. But on the Game Boy, the fact that it came out on that handheld, it's nuts. Really, you think about it. Games shouldn't look this good on the Game Boy, but they did. And this one was one of the best Game Boy games.
Get ready.
Now, we've already kind of talked around the arcade dominance of Sega back in the 80s. You've obviously had a few games, but now we're at the game, the one that kind of properly cemented that dominance in for a generation, and that's Outrun. Outrun, you, a Ferrari, blonde-haired woman next to you, and an open road, just tearing through the streets, listening to Magical Sound Shower, just having a whale of a time. And yeah, it's the pure distillation of an arcade experience. And again, we're gonna have to say the cabinets kind of putting a lot, especially if you're in one of the kind of big hydraulic ones. I think there was a turny one, but I can't remember if that was a different game, like a kind of round one that kind of rotated around you, but I think that was a different game. But anyway, being in that cab with that music blaring out, that blue sky in front of you, just tearing through the streets, getting around everybody, it was how much of an experience is that? How many people were kind of sucked into video games by this game? And it wasn't just kids or whatever. I think I remember my dad played it. I remember it was a game that anybody could sit in and play. It's not been on the list, but Super Hang-On was a game I remember my dad playing. This was the one with the big bike setup. Because he used to ride a bike, he could just look and go, it's bike riding game, we can do that. See, with Outrun, it was a driving game, and it was, I think, that first kind of road of making quote proper driving games that you felt like you were really doing it. Obviously, as a kid, I got no clue what that means. I just want to drive fast, listen to Magical Sound Shower. But yeah, it kind of captured a whole generation, captured a whole era in its aesthetic, in its gameplay. But then it all kind of wrapped it up in this kind of... It didn't really have much of a... Well, it did have a challenge to it. I want to talk about like threat. You were just driving, you were just having a good time. Which, you weren't defending the world from aliens, you weren't beating people up on the streets, rescuing your girlfriend, you were just out for a drive having a great time. And it's just a different kind of feel for an arcade game that makes it, I think, so distinctive and so memorable. And that's what... it's that feeling of freedom of just the open road and the blue sky that makes Outrun such a good game. Something that still to this day, you can pick up and play it. There's a great version on the 3DS with the 3D that looks cracking, and that's a really good version of the game. But yeah, Outrun is just an amazing experience. Of course, there are many flavours of Grand Theft Auto that could have gone on this list. for different reasons. You know, there's San Andreas, which I think might have the best story. There's 4, again, just because of the way it felt like such a leap in the world. But there's issues. Well, the story's good. There's issues with how that kind of fits in with the game. The original one, just for the kind of the seismic effect it had on an industry, and then Vice City because, boy howdy, we all love the 80s, don't we? But I'll go with 5 on my list, mainly because I'm not sure. I think 5 is the only one I've been able to complete. All the rest, I kind of got to a certain point, and then there was like an annoyingly hard level that I just didn't want to carry on playing the game anymore. But I wanted to carry on playing 5. I never felt like I had that kind of speed bump that kind of knocked people off their story mode. Because that's only really, you know, half the game, a third of the game. The rest of the game is the world of Grand Theft Auto, the world of that city, that state, I think it is now, you know, the way the whole thing just kind of fits itself together in that you can kind of have a life. That's, I suppose, more explored in GTA Online a bit more. But in the kind of main game itself, just being able to exist in a world that just carried on around you, that didn't need you effectively. It just kind of did its own thing, and you just kind of moved through it. The structure of the game with the 3 characters was much better. I think it kind of helped with the kind of role play of Grand Theft Auto, because you had what's his name? Was it Malcolm, the crazy one? That was like what the kind of crazy GTA player was like. That's the kind of person you turn the cheeks on and would go nuts. And he kind of gave you that. It's Trevor, that's his name. Sorry, yeah. He kind of gave you the excuse to kind of play nuts because he was nuts. But then the other characters were kind of more laid back, more normal. And you think, oh, that's the guy I'm gonna, build up the house and go golfing with and do all that kind of side of the game. And then when you would go nuts, flip to Trevor, get a machine gun, and start going crazy. He kind of formalized that play structure, because that's how everybody played Grand Theft Auto. You know, you play it to a certain point and then you go, oh, you know what, I'm putting on some cheats. I'm gonna try and get 5 stars and see how long I can escape for. The story itself is fine. There's probably issues with a few scenes in the game, but it's the typical kind of Grand Theft Auto wants to be like Heat, but really it's Crank, but it doesn't quite understand that about itself, which is fine, because again, you don't play Grand Theft Auto necessarily for the game, you play it for the experience of that world, that they're seeing all those systems just meshing together in a way that seems mind-boggling. You know, you kind of look at that city, the size of it, all the kind of NPCs going around, all the cars going around, everything just happening around. Like, you could play the whole game really without visiting sections of the map, and they've got as much craft in them as like an entire game does. It's insane, and it's probably why the game's not bloated. It's so ginormous. It's such a big game with a big scope that it takes hundreds and hundreds of people to make it, to kind of craft that world, to kind of put it together in a way that makes sense. I think Red Dead followed this for Red Dead 2, so that's probably the more kind of technically proficient game, but it's not the city that Grand Theft Auto is. It's much more, not limited in scope, but it's got a different kind of scope because it's the Wild West. Whilst this is this is a big city, and other cities around it, and infrastructure and everything else, and it's such an achievement to think you can play that on a games console. It's insane to think, with the size of it, how far the series has come, from the top-down games 20 years ago, 20-ish years ago, to Grand Theft Auto 5, where you've got jumbo jets and all sorts flying around the place. It's insane, but just to experience that world, just to drive around it, just to think I was going to put the radio on, listen to Baker Street, and just drive around, go to the beach. There aren't many games that you do that. You probably more now, because that's becoming its own style of game, just kind of chilling in a game world kind of style of game. But few games have the kind of swagger and the budget and the money of Grand Theft Auto 5 to make something so spectacular. Well, something so spectacular seems so normal, if that makes sense. Like, it's insane, but it just feels like how it should be. It just feels like you're in a regular world, which for a game is amazing. Now, when I think about games that I put a lot of time into, and I'm talking a lot of time into. Championship Manager 3 is up that list, very much so. I think, again, this is when I kind of got my proper PC, my Pentium 200 bad boy, the one I talked about earlier when I played Final Fantasy 7 on, and Grim Fandango. The game I would just kind of, my default game was Championship Manager 3 slash 97, 98. Was that the expansion pack after this one? Probably around that kind of time. Yeah, it was amazing. It was a time when I was I've never been a huge football fan, but I was much more into following the season, that kind of stuff. I was a Man United fan. I'm a Man United fan. Yes, I live in the south, but my dad's from the north, so that's why. So I can defend that. Thank you very much. But I wouldn't necessarily manage United. I'd be managing. My team really was Sunderland. I remember taking Sunderland to the quadruple of all the trophies, and it's that thing of getting your team, getting your group of guys together, and then just spending years of in-game time with them. So they're your fellas. I remember was his name, Tommy Smith. I kind of picked him up from Watford, I think, stuck him up front, and he scored me 30 goals a year for like 8 years, and he was my guy. He was my dude. I could trust him. David Woosley in defence was a rock. If he got a big knee injury in that few months, I was gutted, because what am I going to do without the Rock? Not that Rock, you know what I mean? It was whatever. My midfield generals like Jermaine Jenners? No, that's somebody else. Jermaine Wright, that was his name. He was one of my boys, and he, again, stick him in midfield, and he'd just leave him there for years, and he would, get me assists, he'd get me goals, he'd, do those match-saving tackles, and it's the story of all that makes Championship Manager 3 so special. I think it's been called a spreadsheet simulator so many times, and that's what it is. You're just looking at numbers and just finding the right numbers to put in the right place to kind of get your team the best. But obviously there's that kind of element of chance goes into it. So when you kind of, click play for that match, you're holding your breath. You're kind of panicking, thinking, oh God, what's going to happen this time? Who's going to get like that career-ending tackle? Who's going to score the 30-yard screamer that you never thought about before? And it's, the story that kind of builds up through that. And it's a very personal story. It's not a story that's hard. It's a hard story to kind of tell other people. You can kind of sit down with Grand Theft Auto and go, I was running for the cops, and then I jumped over a bridge and I blew up the thing with a machine gun, and it was amazing. And that kind of, that feels great. But the story of you finding that guy, that 16-year-old in a team's, reserves that wasn't going anywhere, and you plucked him out for a cheap bit of money, and then you kind of turn him into a sort of world beater. He's turns into like an England captain, has this kind of glorious 15-year career, because you did that. You found him. You were the one who kind of helped that potential to grow into something special. And it's personal to you, and you can't. That's a hard story to tell most of the people, apart from fans of the Championship Manager games, who'll nod knowingly and kind of tell you the name of their person as well. And I spent years playing this, and years with my dad as well. I remember we both had different teams. He did like a lot of Italian teams. Torino was his team. Don't know why. It's just what he wanted to go for. And the two of us began saying, "Oh, make sure you buy this guy. Oh, keep flying this fella. Oh, really? He wasn't that good in mine, but I saw him playing for this team. But he was, I couldn't buy him because he had already gone for someone else." So it was a great communal game as well in my house, something to share an experience with. Because we were both, knee deep into it, playing it, doing the fantasy football teams in the regular Premiership as well, all that sort of stuff. And I think I kind of fell away to Championship Manager 4. I don't know why. I think it just kind of changed things up a bit. Where I don't know, it was a perfect game for me at that time. I've never quite been able to get back into the series as much as I did back then, because, I've got kids and a proper job and that sort of stuff. So I haven't got anywhere near the time to kind of put into a Chapman game anymore. Football Manager game as they are now. But that time of playing that, like I say, hundreds of hours, finding the right formation, the right squad, the right training regimes was time well spent in virtual football land, being a king of Birmingham, taking them all the way to Champions League glory. Those stories will live forever. Mainly in my head, but not until I died, and they'll probably go away. But the point is, I had some great times with this game, and it was brilliant. I mean, what more can you say about Mario? We already talked about 2D Mario earlier, but now we've got 3D Mario. it's insane how Nintendo are able to kind of codify a genre, not once but twice. With the original Super Mario kind of laying down like the proper rules of how a platformer works. Like we'd had platforms before that, but this was like, nah, this is how platformers work now. This game is too good to ignore. And of course, they did say in Mario 64, it was like, no, this is how you control a character in 3D space. This is how you do it, guys. Come on, everybody catch up. The Mario games after that haven't necessarily defined a genre as much after that. Each one's just been, more polished version of the game that came before it. Mario Galaxy on the Wii was a high point. Those games being just this kind of insane raft of ideas just thrown at you on a planet, and then it kind of goes away forever because it was just an idea for that one world and that was it. And then the latest one, Mario Odyssey, this is the one I'm going for, that 3D game, because it was such a good experience to play. Kind of slightly more story, I suppose, than previous Mario games, with like actual text and stuff, with the wedding of Bowser and Peach and all that kind of stuff. Some interesting new mechanics with the hat, being able to kind of take things over to kind of widen the puzzles out, make things a bit trickier, a bit more interesting, a bit more fun. Because, it's not necessarily how do I think past that dinosaur, it's how do I become that dinosaur. Of course, when you take them over, they become a dinosaur with a mustache, because that's what happens with Mario. And Odyssey was and is a superb game. You look at a Mario game and it seems easy. It seems, making these games looks easy because the games are so easy to play, but there's such craft to them. There's such a level of testing to them, there's such a level of polish to them. Because you just kind of know that someone's been like, poring over the layout of this level for so long to get it to look that easy to make. To get it to look like it's that easy to play. And that's probably the great success of Nintendo, is kind of making things that look easy, that look simple, but they're really not. They're so much thought and craft has gone into them to make it like that. That's such an important thing in those games. And Mario Odyssey is probably the current peak of Mario like that. It's just go around this level, get to that point, collect some bits, and you're done. But the mechanics of it, the way everything kind of slots together, it's just so fun. It's just so fun. And it's just such a great game. Being able to customize Mario as well is, really welcome. Being able to put him in different costumes and stuff, that's always fun. But the craft of the game and the way it plays, probably, this or Mario Galaxy is probably the best of the 3D Mario games. And yeah, maybe another day I might have put Galaxy on this list, but Odyssey being on that's fresher in my mind, that's the one I'm going to go for here, because yeah, it's just brilliant. I mean, what can you say? It's peak 3D Mario. I think, this version being on the Switch, the fact that you can just take it anywhere, you can take it, play on the toilet, you can play on the bus, play wherever you want, play this superbly crafted, brilliant looking 3D game anywhere you like, I think that's what gives it the edge, and what makes Mario probably, the best of the 3D games for me, best of the 3D Marios for me. Just because it's so good, and I love hats, so that's what makes it so perfect. So I didn't buy a DS. I swapped my Xbox for my brother-in-law for his DS, the original kind of big chunk of grey one, because I wasn't really playing on Xbox anymore. And the DS, I think it was still fairly early in its life at that time. This was around about probably 2004, 2005. I can't remember when the DS came out now. That seemed to be way more interesting to me than the Xbox. The kind of games coming out for it seemed way more interesting. And the main one that was interesting to me was Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, because this seems daft, but it's a game about you being a defense attorney, which seems not interesting at all. But then you factor in two things. Number one, that it's more like it's basically a visual novel / point and click game. So you're kind of going around locations, finding information, taking it to a court environment, and then just trying to get somebody off a murder charge, which is what the normal thing happens. Secondly, it's made by Capcom, and it's bonkers, and it's in this weird kind of Japanese version of America, where it's we talked I think before about European settings being kind of Japanese, but it's like Japan, but it's Europe. This is Japan America. It's America, but it's in Japan because you've got all that kind of that aesthetic to it. But regardless of that, it's just such a great game. You know, the storylines are bonkers and nuts and fun. The characters are great. The graphics are superb. I mean, there's kind of two flavors to it now. You've got the original, more kind of pixel art. I think the original one came out on the Game Boy Advance in Japan and then got converted to the DS. And then obviously in later years, they've done like HD upgrades, so it's kind of like smoothed out that work into kind of more kind of cell art, if that makes sense. Which, yeah, I mean, I like both versions. I do think I prefer the original arts. There was a great version of Phoenix Wright on the iPad, the first game that kind of scaled up. I think it was an iPhone game, but then you can install it on your iPad and scale it up to fill the screen, and the artwork just popped. It made it look really good. I think that version is long gone now, but regardless, you know, it looks great in either version. And just that those the bonk stories and just feeling part of the characters and just feeling like each story would really get you kind of emotionally invested into it. You know, you'd be like there thinking, God, I can't let this guy go to jail for this crime. He didn't commit it. It was the guy who had the clock or whatever. It was the, you know, that person is very clearly a bad guy, but the judge obviously never tells. You can never tell who the bad guy is because he's just a bit of a doofus. But it doesn't matter. It's your job as Phoenix to kind of the spiky-haired idiot to get that person off, and you really feel like you're in the shoes of that character. You really feel like you're getting through things by the skin of your teeth, which makes the games much more fun and emotionally invested in, which makes it more fun to play. Any of the first three really, especially the DS games, they're all brilliant. I've not got much experience with the Miles Edwards series. They're meant to be quite good. And I keep meaning to buy the new one on the Switch at some point, but you know, it's expensive. You know, what can I say? It's expensive. The point is, like, those first three games, I put the first one in because I think that was the one that really kind of cemented this game into my mind as being brilliant. But they've all got kind of, there's like an overarching story across this and Apollo Justice, the 3DS one. So any of them really, but you know, it's best to start off for this first game because it kind of gets you into that world, those mechanics, those characters, and then each one after that is just more of a pleasure to play once you kind of invested in that world. And it is one of the best game worlds created. The whole kind of universe of Phoenix Wright and those characters is fantastic, and it's something you can always kind of go back to, like a good book. You can always kind of go back to it and just kind of settle into it like a warm and comfortable bath, and just enjoy being in that world, shouting objection at people, and just trying to beat that Miles Edgeworth again, because you know. Because who else is going to stand up, for the innocent, apart from Phoenix Wright? You got to help him out. So any format you want, phone, DS, Switch, whatever. Just they're all crackers, they're all brilliant, and they're all some of the best games ever made. So when you bought Shenmue back in the day, and you took it to your house and you took off the plastic wrap for the game, opened up, and I looked at the manual because, you know, games are manuals back then. You opened it up and the first page of the manual said the following: free, full reactive eyes entertainment. Go wherever you want to go, see whatever you want to see, investigate whatever you want to investigate. Here the passage of time is realistic. A refreshingly cool morning breaks and transforms into a warm, sunny afternoon. The beautiful sunset of early evening melds slowly into a quiet and still night. When it rains, it rains. When it snows, it snows. At times it continues without letting up. Here, life is realistic. There are people who take daily walks in the park, people working hard every day to make a living, shop owners selling their goods, children playing, housewives gossiping. Everyone living their own unique everyday lives. Yes, this world is a real world. Meet to interact with numerous people, grow and learn through a variety of experiences. A compelling and majestic drama that will engulf you exists here. That's in the manual, and that's kind of, reading that back, that's mind blowing, because Shenmue remains one of the most ambitious games ever made. This kind of, what was it, virtual fighter RPG. They got kind of turned into this revenge story. It's a very kind of basic kung fu martial arts film revenge story of a son's father being killed, and then, you know, you trying to go out for vengeance, which, you know, it would have been a side-scrolling brawler maybe 10 years ago, like in the Double Dragon kind of frame of mind. But no, this game is something else. It was something else. It was something very different, to the whole industry at the time. Obviously, everything was shifting towards this kind of world of games, this kind of idea of it's being a kind of open world environment. I guess Ocarina of Time but kind of started that trend of just being this kind of big world that you would just navigate through, and the levels would be kind of within that. But this is different. It's not levels, it's a place. I think that's important to kind of get across. You don't go through levels. You exist in this place. You exist in this world. Like it says, this is a real world. This world is a real world. And it is real within the confines of the games. The characters, the daily kind of routines and everything. Which at the time I think was, mind-blowing and quite revolutionary. Even though necessarily not everybody realised it. I think the problem with the game is A, it came out on the Dreamcast, which wasn't the most popular machine, and B, it being wrapped up in that kind of a very Japanese aesthetic kind of put people off. Is that xenophobic? Is that racist? Who knows? But it just didn't quite connect with an audience the way that, Grand Theft Auto would several years later. Grand Theft Auto plays in a lot of similar kind of ideas, that kind of world that exists, and you just kind of navigate through it. No kind of levels or quote, whatever, that sort of thing. You just kind of move through this world and kind of do what you want. Whereas that was more kind of slam bang, action orientated. Shenmue, you walk everywhere. You kind of walk down the street, you walk down to the shops, you kind of buy a drink, you go down to the park, you kind of watch the sun. It's a much more meditative and much more deliberately paced. Yeah, you got the kind of big action sequences and the big fights and that sort of thing, but to get there, it never feels like a rush. Even though there is a rush, there's always kind of time scales of you having to do stuff and get somewhere by a certain point. But the game never feels like it's rushing you. The game's always saying, nah, just do another pachinko stage. Find like another Virtua Fighter, dude. Go to the arcade. Just chill. Just let things happen at their own pace, rather than you kind of dictate the pace, rather than the game dictating it, which, still stands out in this world of games where, what was I playing recently? I think I was playing Luigi's Mansion 3, and I just wanted to kind of go around the mansion, but the game kept up and saying, "No, have we done this yet? No, have we done this yet? Have we done this yet? Have we done this yet?" Trying to get to one point and then get me moving on through the story. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this, and that's what Shenmue lets you do. It just lets you just hang around, and checking out your Saturn in your bedroom. It lets you check out your practicing moves in the park. It lets you do faultless truck racing, whatever. It lets the game lets itself unfold at your pace as you want to do it, which is still to this day, like I say, it's something that's very unique.
Your son.
And I think that's why a lot of people don't connect with it, because they want to be driven on to the next thing. They want to kind of
It's buried.
be pushed through to the next kind of big set piece. Well, it's not a game about set pieces. It's a game about mood, about place. It's a game about being somewhere. Like it says, it's about meeting people, about learning things. Is it a compelling and majestic drama? I mean, that's up for debate, but because the story never really finished. But
The man you killed in
as an experience, if you connect with it, and that's the trouble, you have to connect with it. It's
up.
one of the best experiences ever in video games, hands down. I spent months playing this game, just kind of working my way through it, just living in that world, and it was one of the best video game experiences of my life. But if you don't connect with it, you don't connect with it. I think you have to be very, very clear about that with Shenmue. It's a game that you kind of have to click with you, and if it does,
We have it.
you're in for the best of times. Seriously, one of the best times ever. Now, what I said earlier about Shenmue, playing it for months, when I get bored of Shenmue, what I do is I turn that off, turn my PlayStation on, and play ISS Pro Evolution 2. Yeah, we're back to football. We're back to Konami, doing one of the best football games ever made. And yeah, again, this is a game I spent months on, literally months, just going through the master mode, building up my squad. I think this is one you could get classic players, where I had Pele in my team, and I had Edgar Davids and all sorts by the end of my Master League run. And it was brilliant. The controls just became so instinctual that it was, you could do things without thinking about it. Like, is it like a fighting game where the kind of muscle memory gets to a point where it's like you're reacting before you can even think about what you want to do? And that's the point I got to with ISS Pro 2. I could just play it. I could just put a game on and just zone out and just thoroughly enjoy this fantastic video game experience. Again, football's like a great video game, great thing for video games. It's always kind of worked, be it from the kind of managerial side in Championship Manager 3 we talked about earlier, or if it's like an actual kind of arcade style experience. Here, kind of straddling that between simulation and experience with the kind of more pro level controls. Pro Evo 2 was just brilliant, and I was always a Pro Evo person, never really a FIFA guy. A little bit. I remember I think I had FIFA 98 on my N64. I think maybe on my something else. Can't remember now. But Pro Evo 2, that was the one that I put serious time into. That I seriously enjoyed, and yeah, just a great game of football that was so fun to play. Even though I've kind of go back to it, I haven't quite got the muscle memory there anymore. But I suppose some practice could come back. But the structure of the Master League was brilliant, and yeah, just literally months I've been playing this game. Memory cards full of replays of goals. Edgar Davids scoring for 40 yards with his thunderbolt of a right foot. It was a brilliant game. And again, one of the best video game times of my life was playing this game. I think one thing that made abundantly clear is how much I loved my Sega Saturn. It probably is my favourite console because of the kind of great times I had, and it also was like a great period. Well, not a great period of my life because it came out a period of depression and bit of antidepressants and all that sort of thing. And then at the end of that, I got my Sega Saturns. I think I suppose as my life got better coming out of this period of depression, the Saturn was there, and that's what kind of was there for me. So playing Virtua Fighter 2 and Virtua Cop and all those sorts of things, as I was picking myself up out of a pretty dark pit, was fantastic. And one of the games that I had at that time was Guardian Heroes and Treasure, which is a kind of fancy side-scrolling beat 'em up. You're in this kind of world where magic and stuff, and you got like a squad looking to kind of take down the big bad guys who are in charge, and you come across this big sword and a golden warrior who's kind of like an AI partner who's controlled. You kind of like give directions to, and he goes and beats people up. And it was just so fun, the kind of just bonkersness of it, because you've got these kind of big chunky sprites, kind of big heavy sprites kind of going around this. You've got like 3 planes you can jump between, and the sprite scales up, and they kind of retain their pixelness, which looks really good. A little bit blurry in places, but overall the art style with that kind of big chunky sprite work is fantastic. And then the kind of mixing the kind of RPGness of it, so you could kind of get experience level with your characters, and you see the damage you'd hit with these kind of, when you hit someone, you see like the numbers come up with the damage, and those numbers just get to ridiculous points in some parts of the game. But the kind of really big bosses and that sort of thing, because it kind of just threw all kinds of loads of characters on the screen, big guys on the screens, multiple versions of thing characters on the screen, but with really tight controls and a really kind of slightly, what's the word? Really tight controls, but you always felt just about in control of the situation. There was so much on screen happening. You kind of felt like you were almost in control, but not quite. And it's a very hard line to run. That is, because if it goes too far one way, either it's too mechanical to play, or then it becomes too chaotic to play. But this kind of really kind of nails the thread in between the two of them, where it's like it's chaos, but you feel like you're pretty in control of it. And yeah, Guardian Heroes is a brilliant game. It's brilliant. I think it came back later in the Xbox Live Arcade, but I never played that version. So the only one I kind of ever played was the Sega Saturn one, which is just brilliant, and it's just so much fun. I think that was the good thing about those Treasure games, that they just made their games so fun to play at a kind of base mechanical level. They were just fun in a way that like most of the games struggled to compete with. That was their kind of great success of their platform games. So yeah, Guardian Heroes is probably my favourite 2D treasure game, like 2D scrolling attack game. Astro Boy for the Game Boy Advance is another one that I kind of thought about on this list, swapping out with this one. But Guardian Heroes, just because it was so fun to play, and some of the other modes in there, like the is it like a time attack or kind of arena modes, they were fantastic. They were well fun. So yeah, it's just that kind of just remembering how fun it was, and how kind of you were just like on a rodeo bull, you know, you were just kind of trying to control this chaos and point it within the right direction to kind of get to where you wanted to get to. It was just such a fun game to play, and it's Treasure, one of my favorite game developers, and this kind of game shows why they should be held with such kind of reverence, because they're just brilliant. Treasure are brilliant.